Hey, it's my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Andrea Ames, a thought leader and a dear friend. And she's going to be talking about the business of content. Are you focused on content as a final outcome or business as the final outcome? Andrea, over to you.
What a great question. I love it. Well, I am going to share my screen and get right to it because, as always, I have a lot to say and a little bit of time to do it in. So, buckle up, my friends. Let's take a little ride on the business train today. As Jack suggested in his question, I would ask you, are you thinking about content as your value, or are you thinking more in business terms about your value? So let's dig into that a little bit. I want to actually start off by telling a story. So it's not a very happy story, actually, but it's one I think we can all relate to on some level. And earlier this year, I've actually had a few people reach out to me with a story like this, but I had a client come to me and say, my whole team has been laid off. And she actually overheard an executive saying to the development manager, your team's going to have to pick up all the documentation. I'm sure we're all like the hairs are going up on the back of our necks when we hear this. It is very unpleasant to consider this kind of situation. But my client, I think, was feeling like this poor boxer, boxer dog, boxer with boxing gloves, like basically a little punch drunk and essentially kind of giving it up, right? Sick and tired of having worked so hard for this company, worked long hours, worked far above and beyond what she felt was being asked of her, or what was even the bare minimum that she needed to do. And yet she felt like her company did not see her value. And here's our challenge. I think this has become so much more important and so much more urgent in the current time, between pandemics and especially the pandemic and the causing a lot of the financial instability. And that is that we are focused on content. And I'm not saying we should never think about content, but we believe content is king. And I don't think content is king. I think that what focusing on content has done for us is kept us deep in the weeds. It's kept us distracted from the real value that we are bringing to our companies. And it's distancing us from the people we need to most communicate with and make a connection with to get the kind of support that we need as content professionals to deliver what our companies need. So content is our thing. It's our love. It's what we create. It's our baby. And it's also, I think, our biggest challenge. And 2 years ago, I think, Dawn Stevens can challenge me on that because time has been weird this year. 2 or 3 years ago, Doug Hubbard, who wrote How to Measure Anything, spoke at best practices, CIDM best practices. And one of the things that he said was such a beautiful verbal embodiment of what I have been really preaching hard to my clients since I left my last corporate job, but even speaking in slightly different terms about the same thing when I was in corporate. And that is measurements about content. So we all talk about how do we measure content? How do we measure the value of content? And his comment was, that's really just leading indicators about the outcome of the content. And I would challenge you to think about what you are measuring, if you're measuring anything around content. Are you measuring the content itself, or are you measuring the outcome of that content. And it's a really important distinction because we have a huge opportunity here. I'm talking giant opportunity. And the opportunity is for us to focus on those outcomes. So things like what is achieved when our customers are successful, right? How do we envision that success of our customers? How do we make that concrete? And how does that success impact our organization? I mean, some of us are in philanthropic organizations. Some of us are doing things out of, at least somewhat out of the goodness of our heart. But for the most part, our companies are in business to make some money. And obviously they want to do that by serving the most people in the best way that they can. But we need to think about that success of our service and how that comes back to the company as impact. And once we figure out what those impacts are, which of those are of the biggest concern to the people we need support from, to our executives, to the C-suite? What do those successes and those impacts look like to them? And what are their biggest concerns? So that's our opportunity. I think it's a huge opportunity. And what I want to talk about a little bit today is I want you to think about how you are possibly or possibly not approaching this. And apologies, my Siri thinks I was just talking to her. I want you to think about how you are or are not thinking about content or business or both. And I want to share with you a few ideas for maybe moving this into more of your everyday. So the first idea is to consider operating your team like a business. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, think a little bit about what characteristics businesses share. Things like they have an audience, they have customers, maybe they have partners. Hopefully they're uniquely situated or suited to deliver wild success on a particular promise. So they're serving their customers in some way. They're positioning themselves relative to what their customers need. I probably should have put successful businesses because I know there are businesses that are just positioning themselves relative to what they deliver. And again, I think they don't get it. Customers do not buy your products. Customers buy a transformation. They're buying their own identity on the other side of that product, right? Wasn't planning to get into this, but I want to stop here and really put a pin in this and have you think about that. Customers do not buy products. They buy transformation. And that transformation looks like who they are on the other side of using that product. So just meditate on that for just a second and think about how your own company positions itself and its products, right? So successful businesses are positioning themselves relative to their customers' needs. They're selling what serves those customers. And they're hopefully providing an experience that delights those customers. And they're doing lots of other things. But if you think about, and those other things, by the way, apply to our teams as well. But if you think about some of the really core commonalities of successful businesses, these are really critical to that. And they are super valuable in terms of how we need to think of ourselves as content professionals within a larger organization, and thinking about that larger organization as our clients and our partners, not as other employees, the people that we have to argue with or that we're in competition with over budget and support, right? No, these folks are our clients and they're our partners, right? Typically they're in one position or another. So if we take a minute and we stop and listen and understand more, hopefully we can, again, going back to what a business does, we can understand who those people are so that we can decide how we are uniquely suited to deliver on the promise. What is our promise, which we'll talk about in a minute. And we hopefully can figure out in the best way possible who are our stakeholders. What do they want and need? And my favorite question is what keeps them up at night? I don't know. I've told this many times, so many of you might have seen that or heard this. But I had a quarterly habit, I guess, routine, I would call it, to go out and talk to my executives when I was in corporate. And I would ask them, what's keeping you up at night? And invariably, there would be something about, things that crashed, right? And some customer system that went down. I can't really assist with that. But when we dig into their top 2 or 3, there was always one and often 2 where content could make a difference in solving that problem, could help that executive sleep better at night. So knowing that is really important. And just like our clients, our external clients are buying their identity on the other side of using your product, our executives are buying from us and supporting us for their identity on the other side of what we deliver to them. So think about that for a minute. How are you helping your stakeholders, clients, partners to transform themselves? We talk a lot about, oh, your job is to make your boss successful, to make your executive successful. But how much do we really deeply think about that, internalize it, and use it to position ourselves to be uniquely suited to that transformation and to serve them or sell them something that serves them to get to the other side of that chasm, if you will. So that gets a little bit into what hooks them emotionally. And frankly, if you're going to sell something to anyone, you need to understand that emotional hook. So when you're thinking about these things and you're asking your executives these questions, I want you to make note of the exact words they're using, the exact words, the exact terminology. And in fact, I would encourage you to jump in and see what do those words mean? If they're using words like content, what does content mean to them? Really deeply understand what's going on with them. I think really listening, first of all, it's going to create a connection, right? This kind of, I guess it's this way, this kind of connection. It's going to create a connection between you and them. But having those words means you can play them back later when you're thinking about your own way that you're serving them and the way they can support you to do that in the best way. And finally, because I couldn't leave out an opportunity for a second dog picture, think about measuring yourself like a business and measuring yourself against business critical outcomes. So what do I mean by that? Well, there's so much opportunity in what I would call the larger post-sales customer retention space. It is crazy. And so I want you to think about some statistics when you're thinking about customer retention. It costs 5 times more to attract a new customer than to keep an existing one. And the smaller percentage of companies are actually focused on customer retention. So I want you to play into that. I want you to think about how you can start acting on the outcomes of content. What are the outcomes of content? Trial conversions, product adoption, customer success and the results, and then the retention that results from that. And maybe even customer advocacy and thinking about how you fit in to customer lifetime value. So there's a lot to unpack here, and I encourage you to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm Andrea Ames. I will put up a link. But I also would encourage you to join the Q&A later today, and I'm happy to answer any questions about those things. But you may find there are other things in your business. So what I want you to do right now, it's weird because we're on video, but I want you to close your eyes for just 1 minute. And I want you to think 3 years from now, right? Just picture you and your team 3 years from now. And 3 years from now, you are the king of your space, or the queen, whichever you prefer. And your stakeholders, your executives have given you the resources you need. They've given you the tools you need. Your customers are so successful, they know your name, okay? And not because, oh, you're that dumb guy who wrote this crappy documentation. They know your name because they can attribute you directly to their success. And now I want you to think about 3 months from now. And the idea that maybe things are changing a little bit on your team. They're getting more respect. You're all getting more respect. Your stakeholders are looking to you to lead. And 3 weeks from now, what are you doing? You're implementing some of these ideas. You're thinking about how your team can operate like a business. You're thinking about how you can measure the outcomes of content, right? So if you do one thing for me today, I want you to show up. I want you to show up. I want you to take action. I want you to pick one thing that I talked about today, and I want you to start implementing it next week so that 3 weeks from now, you're moving forward, you're progressing. 3 months from now, your team is starting to notice. And 3 years from now, you're just the bomb. Feel free to reach out. And I think my time is up.
It is, but stay on the line for just a moment.
Sure.
Andrea and I have been beating the drum for years for content professionals to step up and, as Colin Budd said yesterday, don't just take your seat at the table, steal your seat at the table. The analogy I've been using for years is my favorite movie is Finding Nemo, where the seagulls go, mine, 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 mine.
Yes.
We are the content professionals. If you see an opportunity, don't let somebody else go, nope, I'm the content professional, I'll take that. No, I'm in charge of the taxonomy, thank you. No, I'm in charge of the simplified English word list. And just really, no one will sit around and go, you know what, we have all this money laying around, we don't know what to do with it, let's give it to Andrea. Here, Andrea, here's some money. No.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, I know.